Okay, good evening, members. Welcome to Castle Point Cabinet. Could we please go round for the Cabinet members to present themselves? I will start. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gibson, Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning. I'd also like to apologise for the dress code. I'm stuck in traffic on the way home from work this evening.
Thank you.
Councillor Ross Savage, Cabinet Member for People and Community.
Councillor Steve Mountford, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Councillor Barry Palmer, Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Economic Growth.
Councillor Carol Sage, Member for People, Health, Wellbeing and Housing.
Councillor Michael Fuller, Cabinet Member for Environment.
Thank you very much, and I'm Councillor Dave Blackwell, Leader of the Council. Okay, members, before we continue, there's just two matters I would like to bring members' attention. One of them is both fairly good news stories. I'm pleased to advise the paddocks is once again available for use. Essential works have been completed and the council's insurers have issued a public liability insurance cover. Many thanks to all those involved in getting the hall back into use. Just to remind you, a report is due back at the Cabinet next meeting on the further work, so hopefully we'll be able to get on with the refurbishment. Also, I would just like to say we had a very constructive meeting the other week with Essex and Suffolk Water about the burst water pipes which were causing chaos down at Tarpots, and we're pleased to announce they are spending over £100 million. I think they may have even done the work to divert that main, so that will never happen again. And so we're pleased at least they are listening to us councillors when we bring it up. So have I got any apologies for absent?
Yes, Chairman, you have apologies for absence from Councillor Steve Cole.
Is there any members' interests?
Yes, Leader. I declare a non-pecuniary interest in item 5, the extension of public space protection order on Canvey Seafront. As Secretary of Canvey Baywatch and the Canvey Town Councillor have sent a letter in support of this motion.
Thank you very much. Members, is it agreed that I sign the minutes of the previous meeting? Thank you very much. Okay, members, the first item on the Cabinet is the forward plan. It's there for your perusal. As it's something we generally put on each Cabinet member, the forward plan. It's just there for members to note. Is that noted, members? Noted. Okay, thank you. Moving on then. Agenda item 5, the extension of public space protection order. Dogs to be kept on leads on Canvey Island seafront beaches and seaward side walkways between the 1st of April and the 30th of September. And I call on Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, the purpose of this report is to seek approval to extend, with reductions to the current areas covered and prohibited times, the Public Spaces Protection Order, Castle Point Borough Council, 2020, dogs to be kept on leads on Canvey Island seafront beaches and seaward side walkway between 1st of April to the 30th of September for a further 3 years. I'm not going to go through the whole of the report. It's before you for your own reference, but I will pick out one or two of the important elements of this. Certainly the recommendations that I'll be making, to note the responses to the consultations, to endorse a reduction of time and to endorse a reduction of the area covered by the order. The background to this, for those of you who are unfamiliar, in April 2020, the Council utilised the powers available to under the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act in 2014 and adopted a public spaces protection order. The order applied to the foreshore footpath between the 1st of April and the 30th of September for an initial period of 30 years. And basically the order required all dogs to be kept on the leads and their leads to be in the control of the person or persons in charge of the dogs during that time. Overall, the compliance of the order has been good. The vast majority of dog owners were found to be complying with the order. and those that were not, when spoken to, put their dogs on leads. At no time was it found that it was necessary to serve any fixed penalty notices for non-compliance. During the monitoring and during the patrols, people were questioned and asked for their opinion, most people felt that the order was required, but importantly, they felt that the prohibited times in the area it covered were unnecessarily restrictive. The council approached Canvey Bay Watch and Friends of Concord Beach, and Canvey Bay Watch felt the order should stay in place, but the area covered by the order should be reduced, and which basically this is really tailoring the extent of the order on the experience of what's happened in the last 3 years. On the public consultation, there was an online public consultation, and the key findings from that is that there was still need for an order requiring dogs to be kept on leads. There was no need for the order to be in place for 24 hours a day. The majority of respondents felt the order should be in place from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. During the summer, this is the time when the beaches are most often used. Before 10 a.m, the beaches are generally not used. After 6 p.m, not so. And during the summer, it's the only time that they really are used. And so it was felt reasonable that this order should be amended. And we had responses from the Dogs Trust and the Canvey Island Town Council, and also there was no objection raised by Essex County Council. Simply what I'd like to do is to recommend to the Cabinet that you note the responses of the consultation, endorses the extension of the Public Space Protection Order for a further 3 years. You endorse a reduction in the time during which dogs must be kept on a lead in the designated area from 24 hours a day to 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. each day between 1st of April and 30th of September, and endorse the reduction of the area covered by the order from the area between the Point and Thorney Bay to the area between the Town Council managed tidal pool and Thorney Bay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Members, any questions? Any further questions, members? Then in that case, members, do you agree to recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6, the National Planning Policy Framework Response Consultation in revised draft. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. In 2012, the government introduced the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF, which consolidated planning policy into one document. The NPPF has been amended 3 times since, and the government launched consultation on another revision in December. This revision is part of the wider reforms of the planning system the government announced in the Planning White Paper, Levelling Up White Paper, and part of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which is due to receive parliamentary approval in April. This report sets out recommended responses from the Council to the revisions. I hope that the members have read the report, and therefore I do not intend to go through the whole report this evening. I will, however, highlight some important proposed changes that, if made in the final version of the NPPF, will have an impact on the new Castle Point and planning policy. As outlined in paragraph 4.6 of the report, generally many of the changes align with the approach that the Council is taking in the preparation of the Castle Point plan. Members will recall the agreement to approach was made unanimously at Council on the 30th of November 2022. The government have announced that the standard method for calculating housing need is advisory and the starting point. This doesn't mean to say that a council can come up with a fixture that suits, because any alternative will need to be fully evidenced and can be reduced or indeed increased in exceptional circumstances. What that means for the council is that the work which was highlighted in the report on the 30th of November on a local assessment of need based on aspirations of local residents will be crucial in the new plan. Paragraph 4.7 of the report also states that the government is telling council that they will not be required to amend greenbelt boundaries to accommodate need. Therefore, there is a greater focus on capacity, character and infrastructure rather than planning by numbers and meeting targets at all costs. An important aspect of the examination process and test of soundness is proposed to be dropped, namely that the plan needs to be justified. This does not mean that we can do what we want, rather it is indicating a change in our plans are evidence-based, which results in lengthy preparation, huge expense and documents that have little or no use beyond the plan making process. The links with our new approach of using data to inform discussions and the evidence that is needed so that it is better focused and has a use beyond the plan. For example, an economic and business strategy for the borough. The transitional arrangements for these latest reforms and the timetable that was agreed in the local development scheme for the Castle Point plan in November mean that the new plan could be repaired under this new system and not the existing system. I am asking officers to look into the implications and, if required, prepare a new local development scheme once the reforms have been implemented to take account of them. The draft response raises concerns over the proposed national development management policies, and in particular that the national policies would take precedent over sound local policies in local plans. This could bring local councils into conflict with national government and undermine the work with local communities to ensure that we have policies in plans that reflect the needs and character of the area. These reforms are the start of a suite of reforms that the government intends to introduce on the back of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. The revisions to the NPPF are a stopgap pending a more comprehensive review of the NPPF after the bill is enacted. The advice from officers is to genuinely welcome these proposed reforms. They provide an opportunity for the council to assist the government in driving forward plan making with the engagement of and support of our local community. They, to some extent, align with the proposals and approach to our new plan. Most importantly, they encourage greater community engagement. The recommendations are that Cabinet comments on the draft response to the consultation and authorises the Head of Place and Policy in consultation with the Leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning to make amendments to the draft response for submission. I would happily take any questions from members of the Cabinet or members, and if I can't answer, I will pass over to Ian Buck. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Members? Councillor Savage.
With respect to the NPPF, the planning for flood risk hasn't changed other than numbering in that document. But there are some salient points in there that I want to make sure are put into the documentation for future, in particular with respect to planning and flood risk. And it mentions in there that inappropriate development in areas of risk of flooding should be avoided, whether existing or future. I'm thinking now of existing, and there's probably no greater place than Canvey, but notwithstanding the fact that we've seen surface water flooding across several boroughs, wards in the borough over the last year or so. So I think we should take into point that. And some other salient points about considering cumulative impacts and taking into account advice from the Environment Agency. Yeah, in the past, I think we've seen documents that have been referenced from agencies that have, in my opinion, been totally ignored by the previous administration. And it says in there about taking into account the sources of flood risk and the current and future impacts of climate change. Safeguarding land from development is required or likely to be required for current and future flood management. So where climate change is expected to include flood risk to some extent, existing developments may not be sustainable in the long term, and we should be planning for that. And again, that isn't just Canvey, that's across the borough. So I just wanted to make them points salient to Ian and Warren, so that in future we actually do think about flood risk seriously.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Savage. I think the point's been noted. Ian's made note of it. Thank you.
Any other members' questions? Any members' questions? Members, can I then move the recommendation? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 7, Housing Revenue Account. Rent levels, revenue budget and capital plan for 23-24 and 22-23 revised. Councillor Sage.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Castle Point Borough Council has a stock of council houses which it manages and maintains through the Housing Revenue Account. The council has a statutory duty to set a budget that is balanced and avoids a deficit. The Housing Revenue Account is ring-fenced for the delivery, maintenance and investment of housing services and is required to be self-financing. The council reviews annually the rent levels for council dwellings and garages, the revenue expenditure budget and the capital expenditure plan. All rent collected by Castle Point Borough Council is reinvested back into its housing service, and it funds, amongst other things, decent homes improvements such as kitchens, bathrooms, windows and roofs. It funds a significant programme of reactive and responsive repairs to its homes, including the maintenance of communal areas and essential safety measures such as gas and electrical servicing. Additionally, there is significant investment for the delivery of capital work programme and for the continued development of new, much-needed housing stock. The purpose of this report is to consider and agree the proposed rent levels for council dwellings and garages, the revenue budget and the capital plan for 23-24. Details regarding the rent proposals are at 4.1 to 4.6 and 5.1 to 5.5 of the report. In summary, rent is set using a common framework against which all social rents should be set, and which ensures that social rents in the same area should remain broadly consistent. The proposed rent increase is 7%, and this is in full accord with the government's direction on the Rent Standard 2023 and reflects the national and local picture in relation to rent rises. The cap set by the government recognises the need to strike a balance between protecting tenants during a cost of living crisis and ensuring any cap does not inhibit social landlords' ability to invest in homes in the future. The increase equates to an average increase of £6.61 per week for social rent dwellings and £12.94 per week for affordable rent dwellings. The proposed rent increases for garages is 1.68 per week at 11.1%, which is CPI plus 1%. The council is not insulated from inflation and the spiralling costs of maintaining and investing in our tenants' homes. Repairs and improvement costs, building materials, utilities, borrowing rates, new build costs are all increasing significantly. Setting rents below 7% will put at risk the council's ability to provide its services and meet the needs of its tenants with regards to repairs and maintenance, future home improvement programmes and housing management services, and the council would be at risk of not meeting the regulatory requirements set by the regulator of social housing. Section 4.7 to 4.14 and Annex A and B set out both the revenue and capital proposals for the coming year. These outline the required maintenance programmes that the council must have in place to maintain the condition of its housing stock and the levels of investment needed. The spending is linked to the council's policies and strategic objectives and aligns resources appropriately with the management and maintenance of council's stock. These levels of expenditure are affordable, and the projected housing revenue account reserve levels have been reviewed by the Strategic Director of Resources and are agreed to be appropriate. I would remind the Cabinet that the rent increases need to be set today to meet statutory deadlines. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Such. Members? Members of the Council? No? Then I move the recommendations. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 8, the Highways Ranger Service. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you once again, Chairman. The purpose of this report deals with the Highway Ranger Service. The purpose of the report is to bring the Cabinet's attention to the decision by Essex County Council to cease funding the Highway Ranger Service from the 1st of April 2023. And it also seeks to gain approval for the Council to take over the funding of that service for a year. I'll do the recommendations at the end of my report, but I'll give you the background to this. Essex County Council, as the Highways Authority, is responsible for the maintenance of public highways and public rights of way. Up until now, it has funded the Highway Ranger Service through its revenue budget, and funding has been allocated to each local highway panel for this purpose. The Borough Council receives $80,000 each year via the LHP to provide the service on behalf of Essex County Council. And the service is managed by the Council's Street Scene and Contracts Manager, who allocates work to the 2 highway rangers employed by Pinnacle. However, going forward, the Council was informed in November 2022 that due to the significant financial pressures, as was said, faced by the ECC, it will no longer be able to fund the Highways Ranger Service. This means that as of 1st of April 2023, the grant funding provided by Essex County Council will cease. Essex County Council has confirmed it will not be possible to fund the Highway Ranger services from capital allocated to the LHP, and that on the occasion of the Highway Rangers funding, matters would need to be reported via the Essex Highways Report It tool, and they will be dealt with in accordance with the priorities. So basically what this says in that state is that because they are not funding the service directly, anything which they would be normally responsible for, that would need to be reported to them, and they would deal with it, well, as and when. However, the ECC is agreeable to the Borough and the District Councils continuing to provide the Highway Ranger service if they are prepared to fund it for themselves in future. The ECC decision to cease the funding of the Highway Ranger service without any prior consultation with this council is of course disappointing, given its importance. If the council were to agree to fund a service for 2023-24, it would give us time to explore the possible efficiency opportunities through a more coordinated and integrated approach between our environmental rangers, who look after the council's parks and open spaces, and the Pinnacle staff who provide the Highway Ranger service and the street cleansing and grounds maintenance. As the council would be funding the service, there would be no restriction on where the rangers work, so activities would not therefore need to be restricted to the highway. It is therefore proposed that if the council does decide to fund works on the public highway in 2023, that the service is rebranded as a community ranger service to reflect a more diverse service that they will be providing. The council would need to draw down to fund this, would need to draw down $80,000 from its reserves in order to provide the service in 2023-24. But it should also be noted, however, that the current Highway Ranger truck needs replacing, and Pinnacle have quoted a price of £86,125 to provide this service for the coming year. The additional £6,125 would be covered by any unspent Highway Ranger budget at the end of this financial year, and savings made by the community rangers to do some other tasks such as installing bins, street signs, etc., which would normally have been employing contractors to do that. Okay, the recommendations. This has been a quite difficult decision to make, because on one hand it does mean drawing down on reserves, but on the other hand it does mean that we can continue, if this is approved this evening, to continue to provide this, what I think is a vitally important service within the borough, in terms of not only safety, but also in terms of general housekeeping. That's what we're expected to do as a council. So my recommendations are: recommend that Cabinet notes Essex County Council's decision to cease funding the Highway Ranger service from 1st of April 2023, that the Cabinet approves the use of £80,000 from the reserves to fund the Community Ranger service for the financial year 2023-2024, and the Council will continue to lobby Essex County Council to reinstate the funding for this Highway Ranger service for 2024-25 and subsequent years.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Members, any questions? Members of the Council? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask, if the Highways Rangers are now going to be Pinnacle staff and they are contractors, why is the council responsible to purchase the new truck? The Highway Rangers have done a great job involving them since they started, when there was our Rangers before they become Pinnacle staff. So my question is, again, why are we responsible for a vehicle that Pinnacle staff are going to use? We don't own any of the other vehicles, do we?
Councillor Fuller?
Thank you, Councillor. The short answer to that is that's the cost of the service. They need to replace a truck. We are paying them for the service. Part of that service will be to contribute to the cost of that truck for the year.
And I think this is such an important service, and you know, I don't think as a council we can allow our borough to actually be downgraded because this service is taken away. And I think, unfortunately, it's an ongoing part of Essex County Council's budget cutting, especially in highway services. And I think, you know, we're not the only council to step in thinking this is such an important service. You've all used the Rangers. I bet every one of these councillors here tonight have actually used that service. They do such a brilliant job. And I'll tell you, without that, your footpaths would be all overgrown and there'd be broken bollards everywhere. And they do an excellent job. So I'm more than happy to make this recommendation. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Agenda item 9, Policy Framework Budget Setting. Councillor Mumford.
Thank you, Chair. Item 9, Policy Framework Budget Setting for 23-24. Cabinet, we have before us the report and accompanying documentation which submits proposals and recommendations for the Council's policy, framework and budget setting for 23-24. We ask it to be considered and make recommendations to the Council this evening. I propose we take questions, discussion and debate at Special Council, therefore move the recommendations 1 to 18 as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. There are no other matters. That concludes formal business this evening of the Cabinet, and we will reconvene for a special council. Thank you very much.
Thank you.